接下来的话，我们邀请第3位的分享嘉宾，也是我在开始的时候介绍的Damian Holmes 先生。那他其实的是刚提到的 AILA 世界景观网的创始人。
Also, thanks to Rocco for hosting today. I'm going to talk about venturing overseas and collaboration and projects. I'm not going to talk about design. I'm going to talk more about the business side. Because for the last probably 10 years at Aspect, when I was there, I spent most of my time doing the business side. I was technical director, but also most of the time spent time on the business side. Also, as founder of World Landscape Architecture, I've contact with many different design firms around the world, including ones in China. I lived in China for 11 years between 2005 and 2016. And also spent time in Canada. I worked in Canada for a year, so I sort of know the different types of business around the world, but also recently more I've been asked by Chinese firms about what it's like to go overseas. So I thought I'd just go through that. Big fish in a small pond or small fish in a big ocean. When you are in your home country and in your home, or even in your home city, you are often the big fish in a small pond. Whereas when you go overseas, you're basically a small fish in a very big ocean. And the reason I say that is because when you're in a small pond, you have many opportunities, you know everyone, but the opportunities get exhausted, especially in times like this when markets start to go down. So you start looking overseas, but the issue is you are a small fish in a very big ocean and you only know certain things and certain people. So there are great opportunities, but you really need to think about it. So what I often say to people first is explore the possibilities at home first. You need to think about providing other services or exploring partnerships or discussions with existing clients, because what some people forget and don't understand is when you go overseas, it actually costs a lot of money to do it. It's not something you just do on the spirit of the moment. It does take some sort of time, plan, strategy. So I'm going to go through a bit more about that now. Why? Why are you going overseas? Why do you want to work overseas? Is it the projects? Is it the revenue? Is it the money? Is it the team experience? Is it the cultural exchange? Often at Aspect, we had people who wanted to go overseas because they wanted the cultural exchange, they wanted to design somewhere different, they wanted a different scale of project. So we often looked at that as keeping people within the company as well. It's about a retention of talent. Sometimes you start losing people because the pond is too small for them and their ambitions are very bigger than the pond that they're in. As a company, you start helping them look overseas. So very much you have to be entrepreneurial. Cultural exchange as well is a good thing. Like when Aspect came to China, because I was part of the original team in 2006, we very much were looking at it as a cultural exchange, not just we're going to become designers and work in China. It was actually learning the culture, learning the people, about the people. So the question often I ask is how much and how long? At Aspect, when I was working there, we used to ask this question a lot. When we want to go into market, how much money are we going to invest? And how long do we think it will take? And how long do you think we will stay there before we make a decision whether we should stay? In some markets, it's really hard to actually enter the market. And that's usually established market. So a Chinese firm going to Australia or even an Australian firm going to the US, you have to understand that that is a very concentrated market, a very protected market, especially now in the current business environment where everyone is looking at other markets. I wrote an article about this recently. I speak to a lot of firms and they're all very much looking at going overseas and they're all very much looking at the same markets. So you have to be careful and considered in what market you want to enter. What pays the bills? You can't just send people over there or open an office without actually being able to pay them. So within the company, are you going to give them work or, how are you going to sustain those people? Because sometimes, and you would have seen this in China in the last 20 years, what happens is a lot of firms come in here, don't realise how complicated it is, don't realise how long it's going to take, don't realise the culture, and then after 3 or 4 years, they're gone. In some cases, recently, you would have noticed that after 10 years, they're gone. So you've got to make sure that the management team is making decisions about how they want to enter the market, how much money, and is the board or the management team willing to support this for the amount of time? Because sometimes what happens is things change, business changes, and no one wants to support this anymore. So you have to be very careful about how you enter a market. So which market? There are many markets. I put these red dots. These are the red dots that you are basically the countries and markets you hear about all the time now. Basically, you hear about Cambodia and Thailand and places like this. You hear about India. You hear about Uzbekistan and the various other, as we call them, stands at the top. The other one is the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. The UAE not so much, but Saudi Arabia, Oman, and places like this are still very much active markets. And believe it or not, there are many architecture firms and landscape architecture firms who currently are sustaining their whole business based on Saudi Arabia because it's the only place that has a lot of work and big fees. The other one is Kenya and various other countries, Namibia, Tanzania. And the other one is obviously Brazil, and that's part of the what I call BRIC nations. So Brazil, Russia, India, and China as part of BRICS. Are very much connected. So how do you select the market? Where to work? What are the synergies and similarities that are similar to what you do? There is no point in going to a market if you don't understand what the synergies are and what you can offer them. Somewhere like Australia, if a Chinese large firm came to Australia, the issue would be is the scale is very small in Australia. There is not a lot of major scale projects like there are in China. Similarly in the US, some people don't understand, in the US, 74% of landscape architects in the US do residential and a very small scale residential. So when you think about going to America and there's these big projects, very few firms do these projects and you'll be up against the big firms. So you've got to understand the synergies and similarities between your market and them. Also, are your clients there? Often when I was working at sort of Aspect and a couple of other companies, we actually had clients take us to different countries. It wasn't us who went there, it was actually clients who asked us to go. Collaborators as well, so architects, engineers and others, they're already going there, they've already got a project. Can you, as I say, hitch a ride or work with them and join them in working internationally? Because sometimes if you are smaller than them or the same size, you can go as a joint package, a joint force, so that you work together very well already. The client has some sort of faith in you because basically you understand how to work together. Is the Chinese government investing? For China, obviously, if they're going to Angola or if they're going to various different places in Africa or various different places, say in Russia or Brazil, you need to know that and work with the government. Like when Australia started helping Australian firms come to China, the Australian government was investing money in offices and Austrade and meetings and events to actually bring them over. So if the Chinese government is investing in events or investing in trade offices, make sure you know that and you can rely on that and you can work with them because they make your life a lot easier. Is a management employee from there or studied there? So if someone studied there or lived there or worked there, they understand some about the culture. So often that's a lot better than going into a market cold, as we say. You have no idea. If you have some idea, then you're far better off than you will be. And design project experience. Has someone done a project there before when they were working in another firm? You have to think about that. How to enter a market. So as I said, you work with government, mission visits, are clients investing, So large development firms have also gone overseas, not so much now, but they still own or land bank projects overseas. So know which of your clients are already overseas and talk to them about it and what are they doing and what's their plan and how are they going. Because I think some of your clients will be quite willing to bring you along because they already know who you are, they trust you, they've already worked with you. Another one is, as I said before, collaborators, architects and engineers, who's already in the market. Design competitions. Now, this is what we call in English the Hail Mary, or I don't know what you'd say in Chinese, but the biggest way to get into a market or quickest way to get into a market is through a design competition, plain and simple. What you got to be careful of is are you willing to go there long term? Because design competition is one thing. If you win it, then that's a 4 to 5 year commitment sometimes. So you have to understand, are you willing to commit? So some people think it's great doing design competitions, but sometimes they don't realize the possible outcomes if you win. The other one is invited through connections and branding. So considerations of when you move overseas, political and business culture. You've probably seen this in China when firms come in. What are the expected practices? What are the things you need to do? And what is the language and culture? Because the language and culture is often the turning point of whether a firm is successful or not. It's not the language as in, do you speak English or do you speak Mandarin, or it's more around, do you understand the design language? Because the design language, especially somewhere like the US or Australia, is very jargonistic. It's very centered to the place, and if you don't understand it, then there's misinterpretation can happen quickly. Business compliance. A number of large firms, even small firms I've seen go into countries and not understand the business compliance. You start doing business there, you don't understand the company registrations, you don't understand the company culture. Taxes is something that can kill your company very quickly. Somewhere like India, where you have a 30% withholding tax. So all your fees, all of a sudden your profit is gone because it's wiped out by withholding taxes. Every nation now has agreed to a 15% withholding tax, which means that tax has to be held back until you are either registered in that country or your country has an agreement with that country. I'm getting very technical, but the issue is I've seen several firms do this where the whole profit is wiped out. They're almost working for free because of taxes. Sorry. Insurances, another thing that people don't understand. Not a big thing in China, but the rest of the world and major national, multinational countries like Australia, the US, UK, Dubai, or UAE, Saudi Arabia, these places require insurance and large amounts of insurance. Somewhere, for architecture, sometimes it's $50 million in insurance, which to get can cost you $150,000 to $200,000. So you got to be really careful about understanding the insurances and contract requirements. Certification is another thing. If you go into the US, you have to be certified in every state. You can't just go to, if you go to California, then you have to find someone in California to certify your work. It's really hard. Same in Australia. If you're not certified for engineering in Australia, you can have a hard time. So often you have to start doing these partnerships. I'm going to go through these a bit more quickly. Design, scope and compliance, understanding contracts, understanding scope, understanding national standards. When I first came to China, I had no idea about any of these. And I had to learn on the fly very quickly around contracts, but also national standards. Now, not that I want to offend anyone in the room, but in Australia, we say when you have a contract in China, the contract is not signed and sealed until you have the money in the bank. Because in China, the contract will be negotiated all the way through the project the whole time. Whereas in Australia, when you sign the contract at the start, you will be sued if you don't meet the contract all the way through the project. So it's very different cultural mentality. Management. who is the contact on the ground and do you need a local manager? Another mistake many companies make is they don't get someone local on the ground. You've probably seen this in China when people come here, they don't have a local contact, no one's here, someone's flying in and out all the time. The client gets really aggravated really quickly because they can't have a meeting for 2 weeks, 3 weeks because a person's not coming. So often you have to think about, do you need a local manager on the ground, especially large projects? Seek advice and do research. Work with government, work with collaborators, and do your research online and on the ground. Talk to people. My biggest advice is talk to as many people as you can if you're thinking about entering a market, because they'll give you honest advice about whether or not how hard it is to enter a market. You can read all you want online, but the actual reality of getting certification, getting insurances, working in that market, they'll tell you. Get a consultant. Do not try and register your own company in a country by yourself. It may save you a few $1,000s, but 5 years later, it will come to bite you. I will tell you now. I've seen many firms this happen to, where they had someone in the office, register the company, do all the paperwork, and then 2 years later, realize that they're the wrong structure and their taxes are going to be totally different. The way they have to do business is totally different. Similar to in China, where when we first entered China, we could only sign fapias up to 900 to 99,000 yuan because of the limitation of the capitalization. So you have to think about these various issues. Branding. Think about your branding when you're into a market. Does your name and coloring and everything transfer? You'll notice that many international brands have black and white logos and simple font. 2 reasons. One, black, pretty nefarious color. You're not going to annoy or offend anyone if it's red or green or blue. That's why most companies, believe it or not, have black logos. Similarly, the font is very simple because it's easy to translate. And when you add sort of Chinese lettering or another, Arabic or whatever at the end, it's very easy to do. Who are you? Why would that person hire you? What services are you going to offer in that country? Because sometimes you cannot offer the same services that you offer at home just because of limitations. So Australian companies coming to China, similar Chinese companies going to Australia, you'll be limited by what you can do based on what legislation you understand and the scope of your work. Also your experience. Increase your brand recognition through your website, social media, publication. Conferences is a big thing. Being on the ground and actually being seen at a conference and presenting work is a good thing. Even small events like this start to bring you into the market and people get to know you. Competitions again, and awards. Now, awards, I want to just talk about my awards, which are the AILA awards, which are currently going on. When you select an award, try and find awards that have an international sort of star cast or an international jury. Unless you're entering, obviously, a Chinese awards and you're in China. But if you're into international awards, be careful when you look at the jury, because if it's all Europeans, 9 times out of 10, the winners will be Europeans. And this is one of the reasons I always get a diverse jury, is because I want to have the best designs win, not just because one country, the US or China or India or whatever, is on the jury and they select all the Indian projects. They don't do it on purpose. They just do it through understanding. Quickly, just the dates for the jury. Many categories. When you look at the categories, often you have to look at awards and what are the categories that best suit your project. Sometimes what you think is the best category is not the best one. Ask is my advice. So if you're going to enter a category, ask, send one photo. The organisers are quite willing often to tell you whether or not it'll work or not, because they know from past experience. Conceptual and built cultural awards. These are some of the winners in the past. Some Chinese projects, Indian project last year, American project the year before, again, another Chinese project. So my tips, I'm going to give you some tips on how to enter awards. And this isn't just the WA awards, this is awards in general. Don't use the legal name. Chinese companies have this, obsession with using the legal name of the project. No offense, it is boring to the jurors. Shanghai, insert company name of developer, insert where it is, insert mixed use or mixy or whatever thing it is a very boring title to a project. My advice is think up a more interesting title. It could be, revolutionary, retail in downtown Shanghai. As long as it sounds a bit more evocative, it's better than using a standard title. Do not do a description, do a story. No one needs to know the detailed information of your project. No offense, no one cares whether it's 14,000, 20,000, 24,000 or 28,000 square meters. What they care about is what was the design process? What was the design? What did you do? How did you help the client? What problem did you solve? All these various things are what you need to write into your text, and also be authentic. Don't AI write it either. That's the other thing. I've noticed recently reading some text from various publicities and publications is AI is starting to get used, and you can tell. Anyone reading it can tell that's AI. Just the wording and the terminology sounds very too perfect. Process. Offer some insights and diagrams. Don't offer just all finished photos. All finished photos is great, but often boring. Why should your project win? Select the hero image at the start and write the story to the hero image, because believe it or not, your jury has only got 2 to 5 minutes often to look at an entry. If sometimes larger competitions like international, I know because I've been on 4 or 5 juries, you have 1.5 to 2 minutes to look at a project. If that hero image is not fantastic and the start of your story is not related to that hero image, the jury is just going to be next. Match the text and the images. So many times I read text, and this is for submissions also to WLA. You read the text, it talks about a fountain for 2 paragraphs and there's no photo of the fountain. Make sure that your text relates to your images, because you are telling a story they need to understand. Before and after. The power of before and after images, believe it or not, is huge, especially if it's what I would call renovation project. There's a lot more renovation projects now in China, so showing the before and afters makes a lot of difference. Obviously, it's not going to make a big difference if you're doing a project on a blank piece of land in Chengdu or wherever. It's a blank piece of land. It all looks the same. But if it's a street that you have totally changed, or a building that you have totally changed, or an industrial park you have totally changed, it makes a big difference to show before and afters. Thank you very much. You can contact me at these various things. I am on WeChat, so if you want to grab my WeChat afterwards, come and see me. Also on Rednote personal account and LinkedIn. I know it doesn't work that well in China, but the international version, we do have a company page.